Good morning. Mr. Herr, just to tell you how we are going to do things this morning.
Okay.
We're going to allow you an opening statement,
Okay.
and then we have 2 rounds of questions. Each of us will ask 1 round, and then we'll go back to the second round. And we will, depending on how the interview goes, we will also make sure that you have time for a closing statement.
Okay, great.
Okay, and so with that, if you're ready, please give us your opening statement and tell us a little about you.
Well, I'm very thankful to be here this morning. This body does so much important work. Growing up in southern Arizona, I've been both a customer and a follower and a backer of the game and fish department since I was a little kid. We went through junior hunter training, my cousin and I, when we were little kids, and since then it's been, you know, enjoying all that's out there for our residents to enjoy through wildlife and the native landscape. I think I'm a bit of an atypical here in this situation, given that I haven't been one of those people who go deep in organizations and special interest groups. I've just been mainly more of a science-oriented guy. I'm fascinated by the science of the wolf reintroductions, for example, and understanding the processes that are being put to work there. It's incredibly complex once you get beneath the surface, and so that's why I'm very keen to be involved in whatever way I can. It's part of the reason for that kind of a not neutral position. I'm a member of a lot of organizations, you know, Rocky Mountain Elk, Arizona Falconers Association. I was editor, director, and president, North American Falconers Association, Rio Salado Beach Club. I'm involved in all those groups, and none of them really have a heavy political agenda, and that's where I find my comfort spot. I just want to know, what is the science, what are the best practices, and how do we move it forward? And that comes from a long career working through journalism, starting in Nogales and ending up all over the state, including the Republic and the Arizona Daily Star. And I was Jim Colby's press secretary early on in his tenure. Probably one of the most formative experiences of my life, just seeing somebody work so hard and so smart and so apolitical. And so I've been really steeped in that. Let's not get caught up in the politics, particularly in this day and age. It seems that kind of divides people. I just want to see people come together. And a long career in technology, which is one reason I think I'm atypical. My career went from journalism into technology of websites, database-driven applications, social media cultivation, and all those kinds of things, including rolling out some very substantial platforms across the country, including a content management system that we led the development of, which is now used by half of the newspapers in the country. That's another part of my journey, is that having passed through this era of newspaper demise has led me to understand that nothing is sacred, nothing is guaranteed, and you always have to keep your eyes on what's coming at us. And so in that way, I think I'd be a resource for the department, for the commission, when it comes to hearing from our staff and our field officers what's going on, what are they experiencing, whether it's in terms of, you know, AI-generated permits, or who knows what's coming next. But one of the things I learned in this journey is that, you know, technology pops up. I got into internet development in 1994 before there were even browsers. We built a profitable web platform in 1995, but then I went from there to help launch abcnews.com, ESPN, Outside Magazine Online, quite a few major properties. Disney bought our company, and then immediately all the engineers left, but that's a different problem from the past day. But we went on to do some pretty substantial stuff at the local media level, helping local journalists and community members tell their story, whether it's a video or it's a story that they had experienced or data. And so I think having somebody who can keep a close eye on emerging things like AI, as an example, I've been on about 10 different platforms, and you know, there's a lot of horsepower there. There's a lot of guardrails needed. There are a lot of things that may come at the department I don't know what they are yet, but I'll be the first person reading up on it and getting a deep backgrounder on whatever it might be that's coming. So, you know, I'm not a technician, I was a newspaper guy, but I found my way into the kind of the crosshairs of new product development to help us grow our audience, to help us support our audiences, and to generate revenue to replace the print revenue that was rapidly diminishing. So in that lesson was be nimble, be a little skeptical, be aware of emerging indicators of long-term potential, whether it's commercialization or rapid adoption by consumers. These things will give us indicators to know, well, whether we really need to be too worried about that right now, and if so, what are the things we're going to be watching for? So when I think back to, you know, my family's history, Cochise County, you know, it's been through a lot. My great-grandparents' home in Paul Spur, just west of Douglas, is abandoned. The cattle are in the yard. You know, it's just, the whole thing changed so rapidly. And the same thing's happening with water, water availability across the state. And what is that going to mean to the San Pedro River Valley? What is that going to mean to all hosts of things? And again, coming at things with a scientific mindset, a non-fiction kind of guy, there's ways to see these things coming, and anything I can do now in any role to help the department be as successful as it can be, to support wildlife resources and our active public members, hunters, fishers, falconers, trappers, is something that I believe I was born to do. I finished my career as a journalist about 5 years ago and started a magazine, Catalina Foothills Magazine. I've got some copies if any of you want them. I've got a beautiful bobcat on the cover. But in that journey, getting through the newspaper chaos, I came out feeling stronger, more capable of tackling unknown things, ready to roll up my sleeves and go for the deep dive into whatever the issue might be that's emerging here. I think mapping and, you know, trail cameras and all these other technologies has been a challenge. And I think you guys have been looking at this saying, well, what's the right way to handle this? And I think it was handled very well. Of course, there are detractors, but you know there always will be. And I'm sure you guys have Teflon skin from some of the challenges that any state organization faces. So I'm here to help in whatever way. Again, science first, forming cohesive groups around a topic from all walks and all orientations to make sure that we can bring together a group. And that's, I think, one of the things I learned along the way was by building a good team, a collection of people with passions, it makes it possible to roll out these massive projects in record time. And so, you know, my team got the CEO's citation of the year for technology because we work together like a team. And then, you know, finally, there's a passion that runs through most of the people who are out there fishing or hunting or trapping or whatever. And my wife used to say when I'd come back from out hunting with a falcon, she goes, "See, you need to be out there, that's your church." I have a church, but that's your church, because I'd come back refreshed, energized, and just so much passion flowing from our wildlife resources and our natural resources that I can't imagine being in your role and not see that passion coming through every single person who stands up here. And for anybody to come away not thinking that their passion is respected isn't something I think is happening here. But that's so important, because it may be guys with hound dogs, I don't know. I don't do that, but you can see the passion in their faces. And so to me, that on a cultural level, I think that's essential, is to be able to carry forward their interests and make sure that they're understood so that we can all act appropriately in the best interest of the wildlife, the habitat, and Arizonans, non-Arizonans, Arizonans. So anyway, so that's, I'm Jeff. I'm here to answer any questions, and it's a thrill to be able to have a few minutes of your precious time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opening statement, Jeff, and thank you for being here today. If you're out hunting on the landscape, I'm sure you're aware that we've had some drier years, and the landscape is dry from a past winter and sporadic monsoon. So what do you think the Game and Fish Department should do to protect and enhance wildlife habitats to adapt to these evolving times that we're in? And, maybe outside of water hauling, how are we going to adapt to this? What's some of the maybe habitat projects or enhancements that we can do to help wildlife?
Well, our weather patterns are incredibly impactful on all the species that we interact with in the wild. And I think about, we like to go down to the San Rafael Valley, chasing merns, love scalies and gambles too, but something about being down there is it's spectacular. And the merns are such a special species, but we will only take one bird out of a covey, and we'll move on. And it's sometimes hard to find more than a couple coveys in a morning. So that's an adaptation that individuals can make, and that can be influenced by messaging from the department. The email I got a couple weeks ago saying it's going to be a tough quail season. I think that's the kind of communication that helps us prepare ourselves to be good stewards of the land and users of these resources. But at the same time, I mean, it's almost an impossible question to reach a conclusion around, because it's just so scarce. Now, we may be in a long-term drought of 20 years or so. I don't know if it'll ever change, but I just think being flexible with, permit allocations and potential closures when the range gets devastated from the drought, these kinds of things, I mean, those are operational things you guys deal with the staff all day long. So I'm not sure, that's a very good question, because I'm not sure there's a whole lot that the department can do other than pay attention to the details of what's happening to the populations out there. So I'm sorry I don't have a magic bullet.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
So I appreciate your answer about maybe reallocating tags or take of wildlife. Is there any conservation projects, physically on the landscapes? The department does a lot of conservation projects. I mentioned water hauling earlier, which is very, very important, but forest thinning, meadow restoration, are you familiar with those types of projects, and maybe some examples of what we could be doing there to store more water in the landscape?
Right. So growing up, we spent a great deal of time in the White Mountains, pretty much all summer long. So we were exposed to some very limited forest thinning. There was some clearing to try to regenerate some of the meadows that were up there west of Greer. That seems to be the standard drumbeat of what needs to be done. Whether it's a reintroduction project like the Aplomado falcon, I worked with some of the Game and Fish folks on trying to underscope what that might look like. But yeah, I mean, habitat maintenance, down northeast of Sonoyta, there's been a large area that the Game and Fish has been working on for the black-tailed prairie dog. And just to see the change of the landscape as those species move in back into their historic range has been an eye-opener for me, just to see that, these things are long-term projects and they have a lot of effort that goes into it. And a lot of times it comes back with some pretty historic changes. The California condor reintroduction, the peregrine falcon recovery, all these things the Game and Fish Department played an important role in terms of understanding habitat, take, things like that. So maybe didn't precisely answer it, but I don't know that there's a whole lot that I could pinpoint other than the projects I've seen on the ground. I'm like, oh, that's great. Look at this is working. The bobwhite quail, all these other different reintroductions and habitat restorations, I think are very important in this changing planet.
Welcome, Mr. Herr, and thank you for your interest. You mentioned the reintroduction of the Mexican gray wolf, the science behind that. Can you discuss that a little bit further and the impact that it's had on Arizona wildlife and livestock? And then if there's anything that you would change about the management of the Mexican gray wolf?
So, again, coming from a science background, I defer to the experts in the field, but reading over the reports, the take, when a wolf is removed from the landscape, the description of the whys and hows, seeing the difference between Arizona and New Mexico's management, and just the number of wolves that have been taken there in that state, and understanding why is that different. I mean, my family's, they're cattle ranchers, east of Douglas and into the Chiricahuas, and my Uncle Warner, he was up there with his dogs after a lion that needed to be taken out for depredation reasons. He came upon this jaguar, and he took us all these snapshots. The dog's in there with the jaguar on a rock looking at him like he's gonna eat it. There are a lot of interests on the land. Cattle ranchers, miners, operation, the AI data centers that they're building everywhere, and the water consumption, all those things have to be understood fully. And as a journalist, you know, there are facts and there are opinions. And the sooner that, and that's what they've done, I think, very well with the wolf reintroduction. You know, there aren't opinions anywhere in any of that. The quarterly reports clearly say, this is what happened, this pack formed, this pack disbanded. And then the studies that go behind those is fascinating. I think they're doing a really good job of trying to keep the noise of politics not away, but embraced, heard, and then applying what appears to be the best process going forward based on what the staff tells the team, the commission. But it's highly controversial. I did see my first Mexican wolf in the wild northwest of Sonoma one evening, late afternoon, and I don't know, it's a rare experience, and it was just, I'll never forget that my whole life. I thought at first it was a German Shepherd because it had this black saddle. I said, no, it's not a German Shepherd. Anyway, long story short, it was a spectacular evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
So you've discussed a wide range of issues, but if you could focus to tell us what you believe the two most important issues that will face the Arizona Game and Fish Commission in the next 5 years.
I think the biggest, broadest impact will come, as it seems to do every year when the hunting guide comes out about number of tags available per unit. I think just managing that, and having spent time up in Southwest Colorado, that whole situation has completely changed. It was all over the counter. Now it's they used to call them pumpkin patches up on the hills, all the orange vests, because there's so many people just moving in there that they had to come back around. So just watching how these different organizations, statewide organizations, and how they respond to things, I think managing the demand for hunting opportunities is going to be more and more complicated every year, just because it's a finite resource, and our great state has a tremendous reputation for being a real destination. So I think that's going to be very difficult. And the other is the implications of water or lack of in our habitats. I think about the San Pedro River Valley. I don't have an opinion about that. I go down there a lot. I think it's essential that if there's a perennial waterway, that it's important to understand how to keep that going, because, you know, without water, that whole habitat changes to a desiccated, dry space. So I think managing for the changing water situation is a very big challenge.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Herr. As a commissioner, how would you weigh competing demands? So that would be like recreational access versus habitat protection, energy development, endangered species recovery versus broader recreational hunting and fishing opportunities.
It's a bifurcated situation you have there. You've got the broad interest of people going out fishing at Lake Pleasant or Colorado or whatever. That's a large pool of people, and they're out there getting the most out of our habitat. And so to be able to enable that, whether it's down at Arivaca Lake, there's been some really nice development to enable people to just go out boating and stuff like that. So I think that, you know, be able to support that very large population of people who recreate outdoors is a huge challenge. But at the same time, you know, I think about, you know, the management, for example, desert bighorn sheep, and what that means, because the populations fluctuate, but more importantly, they're very remote and hard to study, I think, but just being sensitive to those niche populations, those populations that need special attention to make sure that they can make progression along the reintroduction goals that have been set. So just in the big group, of hunters, fishers, quail hunters, what have you, just being supportive of their ability to get out there and experience the outdoors with any sort of resources that can be mustered by the department. It might be a checkpoint leaving the San Rafael Valley to see what kind of quail count each hunter's coming out with and how many hours they spent. So I just think there's a lot of analysis of these special populations and these special, I mean, I'm a falconer. That's pretty weird. And so the department has been ears wide open and incredibly sensitive to the challenges of pursuing that life. And they've done a great job. And you look at the decision-making and how, like, the rule-making process that just went through. We were given all that information on a very timely basis to solicit, to help us get educated and solicit our input. So I think for niche populations and for the big body of hunter-fishers, with resources, I think those two things would be very important.
Mr. President, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I noticed that you're a master falconer.
Yes, sir.
That's great. How would you incorporate your knowledge of Arizona's ecosystems into science-based wildlife management decisions?
Well, the last part's the most important part. If it's not
Okay.
done based on science, we're in trouble. Well, not trouble, but we're in a direction that's not going to be leading to good decision-making. I think education of the public is really important. And again, the department's doing a really good job of getting information about what's happening with populations and things like that. But maybe there's a dog, I don't want to trivialize it, an event where maybe it's a bird watching event in the fall here in southeastern Arizona. And I know the Game and Fish Department, they're moving through that organization, they're learning, they're studying. And I just think that the more that they can be fed back data, past experiences, things that worked well, things that didn't, will help them to become science-minded, but more importantly, having a sense of, I own this too, I need to pay attention to this because I care. Like, there was a discussion about reintroducing the neotropical apple-mottled falcon down in southeastern Arizona. Unbelievable raptor, unbelievable. But the Game and Fish people were like, we don't know. We don't know if we can do this. This is an endangered species. That unleashes all these factors and considerations. So I think just being aware of very specific, it's not very helpful, very sensitive to the things going on, well, again, like California condor, or I forget the name, there was some minnow, I was talking to George about this minnow project down on Turkey Creek to move one population and put part of it over into another part of the creek that didn't have that population, and now they're studying it. And so I just think paying attention to these things that, I mean, you guys are responsible, not responsible, well, yeah, you are, for more than 400 species of animals and the plants that sustain them. So there are a lot of niches there, populations, and I don't expect that you get sucked into the falconers camp necessarily like a rah-rah, because that's not the way you guys function. But we're pretty excited, and we usually get at least one or two guys out when we're out for a gathering to see what happens. And I think they come to understand that these wild animals are wild, and yet they work in tandem with us, and there's a certain ethos to that. Thank you.
So, wildlife habitat management requires close coordination with the federal land managing agencies. What are your views about these lands, and what type of relationship with the federal land managers would you guide the Arizona Game and Fish Department to develop?
I'm thinking about the North Rim right now and how much devastation was unleashed, to the point that, you know, looking back, and now people are wanting to have winter roads in there, and so how to administer that landscape, how to make sure that, you know, it's not people on ATVs all winter long scaring the herds. I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't have any data or opinion on it. I just see that these people want to do that, and I think about how the feds are managing reintroductions, they're managing the forest, they're managing the desert, and we all live in that environment of, you know, what's happening on the ground. So I think clearly it's a matrixed organization when you have the feds, the state, county, city, and neighborhoods. So there's the art in governance that I've been a student of as a journalist, watching how it works in the State House or in Congress, understanding how these decisions are reached. I think it's understanding the different players who are at the table. And I've got to imagine that there's a lot of interaction with, for example, the Fish and Wildlife Service on a lot of these projects and vice versa with them, with the department. So it strikes me as a very challenging proposition to try to herd all the cats and try to move forward. But there's so many resources available by tapping into these different organizations or bringing them in to be part of the whole process and the decision-making on the landscape.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
What is your view of federally designated national monuments, wildlife refuges, and conservation areas?
So, selfish me loves them because it's opening all this new landscape to everybody in most cases. But I look at the declaration of these national monuments. I am deficient in my knowledge of how that plays out on the ground when a national monument is declared. I mean, that changes a lot of things, but how did we get to that decision? That's where my head's at right now. I want to understand the process of making the decision to declare a national monument. It feels sometimes like it's really sudden, and without all the communities of interest tied in to make sure that we're all kind of thinking and seeing kind of a common, what is it, so that we can respond accordingly. So I'm a little nervous by the sudden declaration of federal lands being, but I love it at the same time, so I'm a divided man. And then you look at the Samoa National Monument, and what a spectacular example of the federal agencies coming in to help make that a resource that all of southern Arizona can really take advantage of. So there are a lot of wins, tons of wins. A couple questions on my mind about how the process is orchestrated to make good decisions about setting aside land.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you're appointed and in a situation where you would have very limited constraint, hypothetical, what is one of the things that you will do as a commissioner?
That's a really good question. I think small game often doesn't get as many resources as big game does, and when I'm down in the grasslands, I wonder how in the world is it possible to monitor these populations and set bag limits. I mean, Merns, these guys will come, they're all welcome to our state. These guys will roll in from South Carolina with their trailers, and they'll vacuum up a covey in an hour. And it's like, how do you manage that? So I would think that there would be some way of applying more science to the management of populations. I mean, one thunderstorm can change the outcome for an entire covey, or the one that went by that missed. So with some of the new technologies, some of the spatial technologies, we're able to do mapping of things, whether it's take numbers or whatever. I just think turning more energy into small game population management without hindering what's a reasonable take, that's the kind of thing that I think about a lot when I'm out there. And just, can we put more resources forward to help these populations to understand their trends and find ways to maybe it's a brush clearing project that gets put in motion to get some of the mesquite trees out. Just to find ways to, and this is a very tough financial environment to be in right now, find ways to put resources forward, whether it's an organization, Arizona Quail Group, getting them involved, things like that, just get more hands, you know, pulling the rope, and I think we can maybe do a little bit more with the small game populations. Big game, that's already the big stuff, that's where the big science seems to be, so that's just my opinion.
Arizona is a growing state, as you know, and polling has shown that an ever-increasing number of Arizona residents are not aware of the role Arizona Game and Fish Department plays as it pertains to Arizona wildlife. Why is it important to raise that awareness level for Arizona citizens, and what might you suggest to do to raise that awareness?
There is a lot of education. When somebody comes in from Cincinnati and moves their family here, they have no knowledge in many cases of what's going on out there. First of all, they don't realize that the department is not funded from the general fund. That's huge. That means that these people who use the resource are paying to manage the resource. So that's a huge win. That should be written on the top of every building down by Capitol. And it's kind of hard when people are new to the area to take it all in, it seems to me. I mean, what is that? It's a javelina. You know, I think there's just so many fundamental things to learn. And I think local media does a pretty good job of highlighting, given their limited resources these days. Sidebar, when I was at the Star quite some time ago, we had 150 journalists. They now have 20. Putting out the same amount of material every day, what it means is we have fewer people to tell those stories. So in that case, maybe the department has to keep doing great stuff with the magazine, getting that in maybe a welcome wagon bag when somebody moves to town. Let them see that, let them understand all the things that are available here, whether it's herps or, you know, condors. There's so much to learn here and appreciate. And I find that where I live, we have a lot of big Aleppo pine trees, and those Cooper's hawks are flying around all day long. And when friends come over or the neighbors are, what's that? Just peer-to-peer education is kind of the bottom rung of that. The top rung is what the department does now to get news and information out to the public. I think it's just so important. Because you guys are doing it without general fund, so there's a lot to that. And I think people need to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Herr, what does the North American model of wildlife conservation mean to you personally, and how should it guide the Game and Fish Commission in making decisions?
I think it does guide the commission today. It is the cornerstone of everything that you do. And again, it goes to science too, right? I mean, being aware of what's happening with populations. Without the scientists, it's shooting in the dark. So I think it's a structured way to look at management of wildlife resources. And I can't imagine a better way to go about doing that. It's phenomenal.
Sir, I read you had ideas, you thought it was important that the Game and Fish diversify funding, and I believe you mentioned that there needs to be sustainable funding solutions. Could you elaborate on your thoughts regarding that issue?
Well, for starters, you know, licenses and permits, that is a substantial source of revenue for the department, obviously. The question is, what happens if we're unable to sustain that population of hunters or fishers because of habitat change or whatever? Maybe there's a way to that's such a hard question, because I mean, we could do more and more education around, you know, school-age kids and things like that. I know oftentimes my daughter's teachers would ask me to bring a falcon in, and the kids loved it. And I know for sure at least 4 or 5 out of maybe the 200 they had forevermore in their brain that Raptors rock, and that happened to me somewhere when I was like 4 or 5, I don't know why. But just being able to build the base of support, starting young, cultivating it by ongoing education as you do, working with local media partners to showcase the work in the field, it sets a foundation of support, and you've done a great job with that. And it used to be the ability to pay $200,000 for a bighorn sheep permit, help to get the big high rollers engaged. And it's all that space in the middle, from the kids to the wealthy old dude out chasing the sheep. All good, but we've seen how that's changed, right? That's gone away. So just engagement, education, and all that's being done. The department's phenomenal in that way. And I think it shaped me as a person on the land from a young age. I don't mean to dwell on that, I just think it's engaging young people and newcomers. It's a big job, but it's so important. It's so important. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a closing statement for us?
I do. I've spent a fair amount of time with department staff, mostly around Raptors and things like that, but also just because I'm a nerd. I love what goes on at the department offices. And so I'm always looking for a reason to go in and see if there's a new pamphlet for the spring hunt and things like that. There's a passion that was built in me by my family, by the department over time, and just my innate curiosity about science and natural history. But then there's a whole bunch of people that are kind of not quite there. They haven't been filled with this passion of wildlife and wild places. So any chance we can get to get more people out, maybe it's again, this can't fall in a department because you're already so constrained, but finding ways with organizations, maybe Save the Scenic Santa Rita's does hikes to see what the Santa Rita's are all about. That's an incredible mountain range, by the way. Yeah, it's a lot of work to socialize the important stuff that's out happening.
Thank you for coming tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for
Thank you for your interest in becoming a commissioner.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time.